You. Good evening. Welcome to this Monday, November 9th, 2020 meeting of the subcommittee of the Braintree Town Council's Committee on Public Safety. Based on Governor Charles Baker's current orders, we are conducting this meeting via Zoom. And as such, any and all votes will be taken by a roll call type vote. Clerk Semino, could you please do a call the roll to begin the meeting?
Councillor Ringus.
Here.
Councillor Mackin.
Here.
Councillor Ryan.
Here.
All present.
Thank you, Clerk Semino. The first item on the agenda tonight is the approval of minutes from August 30th of 2017. I would note that back in August 30th, 2017, none of the current members of the Committee on Public Safety were members of this board. The current regulations on that are, as long as we believe in the trustworthiness and accuracy of the minutes, we can vote on said minutes. Do I have a motion for approval of the minutes from August 30th of 2017?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Councillor Ryan, second by Councillor Mackin. Clerk Semino, a roll call vote.
Councillor Ringus.
Aye.
Councillor Mackin.
Aye.
Councillor Ryan.
Aye.
All in favor.
And that is unanimous. Thank you, Clerk Semino. There is no old business to discuss, so we'll be moving right to new business. Thank everyone that is present here on the meeting tonight or watching at home. We're beginning with order number 03320, which is a proposal by Councilor Sasha to review safety along walking and bike routes to schools or taking up any action relative thereto. I do know that we have Superintendent of Schools Frank Hackett here. I know that we also have John Thompson and Councilor Sasha, who sort of proposed this initially. With that said, I would first ask Councilor Sasha just to speak a little bit on why he moved this and what he was looking for in terms of information, and then we'll turn it over to hear from some of the presenters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really just wanted to bring this before the committee as a parent of school-age kids who, I did this same night action to try to get this conversation going before school started, just to try to figure out how the kids are going to be walking to school, because I know my kids are walking for the first time in their lives. They're usually bus riders, and they have to cross Washington Street, which is always a little precarious. And I just thought that this would be a good venue for getting the parents together with the school board members and the safety committee members and the DPW to figure out where there are gaps in how students are walking or biking to school and how they might be addressed.
Thank you, Councilor Sasha. Before we move on from that and start to hear from the presenters, Clerk Semino, I noted that Superintendent Hackett was here, but I also have noted in the participants that School Committee Chairman Tom Devon is listed as the attendees. Is there a way that we could flip him over to a participant?
Yes, I can do that.
All right. So with that said, welcome to Mr. Thompson, Superintendent Hackett, and Chairman Devon. Mr. Thompson, I know that some photos were provided earlier of some of the areas specific to what Councilor Sasha was referring to. And I think we'd all just like to hear from you on what some of those photos mean and from your perspective, how these sort of walking paths are safe.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Councilor Ringus. So just to update the committee, in September of this year, we learned of a grant opportunity through the Mass DOT and applied for a grant to make some school zone upgrades at various locations around town. The maximum award for that grant per community was $300,000, and we're pleased to report that the town of Braintree received $291,000 to make school zone upgrades. And so this includes work at 6 different locations. There's 4 elementary schools, which are Flaherty, Hollis, Highlands, and Morrison, and the 2 middle school locations of East and South Middle School. And I did provide basically some conceptual drawings overlaid on some aerial photographs of the work that's going to be occurring at those locations. Work is already underway at 4 of the 6 locations, and we hope to get the work at the other 2 locations, which would be Highlands and Morrison, started this week, if not next week. But just basically briefly, what we're doing at each location is we're attempting to upgrade the school zone signage. So the signs that would typically flash 20 miles per hour to physically demarcate the school zones. We're updating that signage to newer signs that would be more visible, LED signs. And these signs will also have radar speed board readings to notify vehicles driving by of the speeds they're going. And what we're also doing at each location is upgrading the mid-block crosswalks at these locations. So we're going to be installing a blue high friction surface within the crosswalk bars to make them a little bit more high visible. And we're also installing rapid flashing beacons or strobing yellow lights at the crossing locations just to make the crosswalks a little bit more visible to vehicles. And lastly, upgrading the wheelchair ramps at select locations to meet ADA code.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any questions from members of the committee? And that could include Councilor Shasha as well, if you have any questions. I'm not seeing any. Councilor Mackin.
Thank you, Chairman Ringus. John, I was looking at the drawings you put together earlier, and they look great. So I know, just curiosity, so I know we got 291,000, roughly of grant money. What are the cost of the upgrades that we're making right now? Is that
So the upgrades that I summarized on the 6 conceptual drawings basically uses the entire amount of the grant funds.
Thank you.
Sure.
Councilor Shasha or Councilor Ryan? Councilor Shasha?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I definitely think that's fantastic. I want to make sure that we don't lose focus, though, on, at least my focus, the reason I brought this up was specifically the current situation with COVID-19 and the kids that are walking to school that are not typically walkers. And from what I've seen, getting kids back and forth to school, the immediate school areas are generally not the issue. I know at least at East, there's a crossing guard at all of the major intersections near the school, but there are a lot of kids that are walking up to 2 miles, which means they're traversing pathways in town that they typically would not. So crossing, Elm Street, crossing Washington Street. And I think that those are the ones that I would just hope we could, focus a little bit of attention on and see if there's anything that can be done that is, if there are extra crossing guard bodies, could some of them be put in those areas where a lot of kids are crossing? Somebody raised the question to me, could the River Street tunnel under the highway be opened back up during school hours? So I think that's the kind of thing that I was just hoping this committee might kind of take a deeper dive into and see what else we can do for the kids that are outside of the typical walking area but are now walkers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Shasha. I think for a second, I think he's still here. If I could turn the meeting over to Superintendent Hackett, just to get his insight on what he sees. I know it's been a little bit different this year with sort of increased walking distances, and see if he had anything that he wanted to add in terms of what they're hearing from parents or seeing with some of these increased walking distances. So Superintendent Hackett, how are you?
I'm well, thanks for having me, Councilor Ringus and everyone else. Good evening. Yep, clearly it has been a lot different this year. We're a little cursed by the fact that Braintree has always provided almost door-to-door transportation. So we've been fortunate over the years that we've been able to pick up students who otherwise in a lot of locations, a lot of towns, communities would not even be picked up because our service has been that good. So to go from that to, our goal right now and what I was most concerned about, I'll speak for myself, was if we try to do too much more than the more than 2 miles state law. And the state law is more than 2 miles or more than 1 mile from a bus stop, that we were going to run into situations where, because we can only get 25 kids on a passenger bus, a large passenger bus, that we were going to run into a situation where we were not going to be able to provide the service. So that's where we are right now. We have explored trying to pick up elementary students within 1 mile to school. And as of today, have come to the conclusion that that is not going to be an option for us. We just would not be able to, we would not have the capacity to provide the service. But we are now honing in on what can we do for perhaps for students who are 1.5 miles or more. So we keep trying to check that radius to see, and we obviously have to assume maximum ridership from that radius, because otherwise we could be in a situation where we'd be coming up short. We have in a couple of situations, and Councilor Mackin worked with me on this on the Route 37 issue over the last few weeks. We were able to get a couple of additional buses out there for both Highlands and students at South Middle School, which obviously was timely and provided relief for what we know to be a dangerous area. We have tried to extend to those kinds of situations where students would be crossing heavy traffic. But again, we've not been overly successful because we just don't have the capacity to be able to do it. So we continue to explore and try to expand the routes. We recognize this is as an issue for a lot of our kids, a lot of our parents, and but there's no simple, easy solution until we essentially make a decision either at the town or the state level. Probably, in my view, it's at the state level to expand the capacity of our buses to something more than the 25 that we're currently trying to manage.
Thank you, Superintendent Hackett. I would allow Chairman Tom Devon of the school committee if he had anything he wanted to add.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to participate. First of all, this has been rather challenging, going from bus routes where we could get 45 kids on a bus now to half that at best, and trying to be creative. And yet it's a situation where it is our bottleneck, and it is because of our trying to socially distance and making sure all our children are safe. I don't think it's an easy situation all the way around. We're constantly looking at what we can do as far as routes and things such as that. I will make one comment though, as far as the old underpass. I used it at one point in time when I was going to junior high school at Central Junior High. It's kind of remote. It's kind of dark and dingy. It's going to need some type of rehab because it's been closed now for almost 30 years. I do remember it being a security risk, and that was back, I hate to say it, but back in the early 70s. So I think that's something you would have to bring the police in and get their thought process on that, and other stakeholders. Even if it's still, shall we say, structurally feasible now. I don't know. It hasn't been opened in over 30 years. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chairman Devon. Any questions, members of the committee or Councilor Sciascia, for either Superintendent Hackett or Chairman Devon? I see Councilor Mackin's hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Ringus. So, as Dr. Hackett mentioned, me and him had several conversations regarding school children in my district and a route they were walking, which involved South Street and Route 37, which, I appreciate, all the challenges they were dealing with, which he had explained to me in more detail. And, thankfully we were able to come up with a solution. And, this weekend there was actually a fatal accident there, which I'll bring up later. But, issues similar to what Councilor Sasha brought up, what he had in mind when he filed this referral was, the issues that me and Dr. Hackett spoke about. We know they were kind of spread out throughout the town. And I think Councilor Sasha, correct me if I'm wrong, but what he had in mind when, he put this forward is if we identify some of the more problem areas and then come up with what we can do about those. And unfortunately, the state laws are what they are with COVID, and our busing situation is what it is. And there's only so much we can really do about that right now. So I know, John, you guys put a lot of work together around the school buildings themselves, but if we could, and I don't know if Dr. Hackett or Chairman Devon have a better idea of what the more, if parents have given you any feedback about some of the higher priority crossing areas are more dangerous and we're coming into bad weather, and there could be kids walking snow along those routes as well. And we hope not, but we don't know what the situation is going to be going forward. This is all continuing to move. But if we could maybe identify some of the more problem areas or potentially problem areas, and there's not something we're going to solve tonight, but if we could kind of come up with what contingency plans, if we're still dealing with this when the snow comes, what options we have.
Sure. No question. And also, just as we enter now into, days that have fewer sunlight hours, it's also just more concerning. And soon it will be concerning on either end of the day, both as we pick up in the morning and drop off in the afternoon. And we have certain spots that are always kind of concerning. I will say that parents driving students to school is certainly up. I think that, I've seen situations where parents are partnering and they're kind of carpooling and they're trying to arrange their schedules around schools so that there's someone who is actually driving, picking up and dropping off students. But, that's a pretty difficult situation. And I'm sure for parents, the sustainability of that is difficult. I'm hoping that as we continue to move forward, that we get a little bit better, or I shouldn't say better, more guidance on distancing on our school buses. The distancing on our school buses and the physical distancing, which is, it's basically 6 feet on buses and 6 feet within our classrooms. And some school systems are using, 3 feet in classrooms, but I've not heard of anyone who's using 3 feet on buses. We're unique in that we own our own buses. Our drivers work for us. A lot of places around us, a lot of school systems that generally contract out with a vendor like a First Student. They have a little bit more flexibility because the First Student can pull, for example, if First Student I know, for example, covers Holbrook, Weymouth, Rockland, they can call over and say, we need 3 more buses on this route in Rockland because we have this going on. There's an economy of scale that we just don't have. But there are also disadvantages to that too. So, as we continue to go into the winter, we're hopeful that we can see some relaxing of the physical distancing. And the other thing, candidly, as the superintendent who makes the decisions on snow day calls, when we have the ability to be fully remote for that snow day, I'm kind of going into this year with a different mindset than I would be normally, understanding that, we do have kids who, who are walking, who the wintertime is going to create some more difficult challenges for. So, we're going to try to mitigate it in a bunch of different ways. We continue to examine our routes. We continue to examine kind of what we call the hot spots as to where we might be able to get a bus out. The challenge is, Councilor Mackin, as I explained to you, if we can only get 25 kids on a bus and we only have 1 bus available and we show up and there's 35 kids, we're kind of in a tough spot because, we can't kind of decide which kid we're going to put on the bus. We've got to be able to deliver the full service if we decide to pick up another stop. So, it's going to be a challenge, but, we continue to work it actually, really honestly, almost every day.
Thank you. Councilor Sasha.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Hackett and Mr. Devon. And I totally understand the issue with the school buses, and I think that's why I felt it was important to bring this to the council, because there are some things that the schools just can't do. The schools can't go out and shovel the sidewalks. right? And I think, even to Councilor Mackin's point, as we go into snowy weather, when I used to walk to the train every day along Washington Street, there were 4 or 5 places where such big ice dams had built up on the sidewalks from people plowing that you'd have to walk out into the street and walk around them. Now that's fine for me walking to the T, not so fine for an 11-year-old walking to school. So could we even look at, I know this would require some overtime on the part of DPW, some funding from the town, but even just a more aggressive salting and shoveling and clearing process within 2 miles of the schools. Something like that, I don't know how much snow we're going to get this year, but it could be difficult for kids that are still walking.
I am.
Thank you.
Can I
Thank
say
you.
something?
Councilor Shasha. Anyone further with anything to add from members of the committee?
Director Arsenal.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that we are pulled usually to the limit on the amount of staff we have. They're up 24 hours a day. They are just working nonstop. They're out there in the middle of the storm trying to do the best they can. We use every resource we have available when we have a storm, and it would be extremely difficult to provide additional resources because we use everything we have. It's usually a constant battle. We will try to increase our efforts the best we can, but I'm just letting you know that it is a extremely difficult task just to get the around the schools. We always hit the schools, we always hit the areas around the schools, but to hit the entire town, every single sidewalk would have to hire 30 more people. There's just no way we could hit the entire town. It would be almost impossible. Maybe certain areas, if they're known to be high priority, we could do that. But some communities have it where it's mandated that all the people have to shovel their own areas, and that would be an option. But it's not out there now, but we just don't have the resources to do the entire town.
Thank you for your honesty there, Director Arsenal. Any further follow-up from members of the committee?
Just going back to, what Director Arsenal said, it's obvious it's not possible to do everywhere, but if we could, and he just mentioned this, identify what some priority locations would be, we could just be prepared in the event that this is something we have to deal with. We know what those spots are going to be previously.
Thank you, Councilor Mackin. Just a couple of questions. Dr. Hackett, I know you're sort of referenced a couple times the various guidelines that you're faced with in terms of COVID with the 6 feet versus 3 feet. Any sort of inside baseball on when we might be sort of relaxing some of the standards on buses, or is that sort of something that's still pretty far out there?
Well, I certainly think we're getting some signaling now from the governor's office and from the Department of Education. To me, most kids are on a bus not much more than 15 minutes, so we have the windows cracked. To me, that's a less of a risk than kids in a classroom in a school for a 5 or 6 hour period of time. So I think it has to be on its way. I think people understand that the goal of getting back to full in-person learning isn't going to happen until we can deal with the transportation issue, especially in communities that rely on it even more, that are more rural than we are. We are compact, as you know. There's a lot of traffic. We have our struggles anyway, but I think that for the most part, we should be seeing something coming our way. I would anticipate in the next 4 to 6 weeks at the turn of the new year. I would also just want to say that historically, the mayor, Mr. Arsenal, and myself are generally texting and on the phone together around 4:30 in the morning. We stay very much close in contact, and we recognize that, they do a great job with the resources they have. We've historically been able to say, okay, Ross is our walking school. You really got to make sure you hit those sidewalks, and they nail them. But now, we're in a situation where every school is at least a 2 mile out walking school. So there is just no way they're going to be able to do that. So, we will be, our approach to deciding whether or not we're going to have school versus a snow day is just going to be a lot tighter than it's ever been. And to provide DPW, if they need an extra day or two to try to clear stuff out, we have the option of doing that this year, which we don't want to do because our in-person time, learning time is limited as it is, but obviously safety is first. So
Now I believe it's coming up relatively soon that the school committee voted that many of the elementary schools will be going back on 4 half days starting, I believe, next week, if I'm not mistaken. And also, I guess secondarily, I think you've referenced snow days a few times. This sort of, I think, a kind of a funny meme going around right now that the one thing about all this Zoom and remote learning is that typical snow days aren't going to exist for kids anymore. So is that sort of relatively accurate, that, you are going to have the ability, even when the kids are back in school, 4 days a week, to transition to a remote day if you had to call a snow day for some reason?
absolutely. Yep. That is totally accurate. We can jump in and out of remote fairly quickly, especially if we're talking about a snow day here and there. We're positioned pretty well to be able to do that. It's not ideal, but we can definitely do it.
Okay. So in essence, we do have the ability with your consistent communication with the mayor's office and with Director Arsenal. Then thank you to Director Arsenal. I know his staff has a lot on their plate when we do have these storms and trying to get everything cleaned up. And obviously the trying to cover every single sidewalk in town would be an almost impossibility, if not a total impossibility. So I think continued communication between those 3 areas and ensuring that, the schools do are mindful, and I know you will be, Dr. Hackett, will take the necessary steps to ensure the kids are safe. So I thank everyone for being here tonight. Before I wrap up this segment of the conversation, any other counselors wish to speak or ask any questions? Seeing none, I think this is possibly something we can maybe revisit in a month or so as we get towards more inclement weather. Obviously, as Dr. Hackett indicated, it seems from the past couple of governors' briefings that we're changing up some metrics and how they measure them. Braintree, I know, has now gone from, based on just the way they're now running the numbers, has gone from a red community to a yellow community. And I think we'll see a continued loosening. And I believe the Governor Baker's directive seems now to try to be getting children as much as possible back into school. So as that sort of continues and we get further guidance, perhaps, and we get closer to bad weather, perhaps we can revisit this with the Public Safety Committee in the future. So thank you to Mr. Thompson. Thank you to Superintendent Hackett. Thank you to Chairman Devon for being here tonight.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. With that said, we'll move on to our second piece of new business this evening, which is Councilor O'Brien's evacuation procedures or taking up any action there too. Councilor O'Brien did reach out to me. He was not available to attend tonight, but he did want to have this addressed. What I will do is sort of read first exactly what Councilor O'Brien was looking at. Clerk Semino, and this message was sent on Thursday, October 1st of 2020. Mr. Lang and residents of East Braintree have long been complaining about the poor air quality in East Braintree. Evidence was presented to the council in past sessions, and recently the MAPC, Metropolitan Area Planning Commission, completed an HIA, or Health Impact Assessment study, mostly for the compressor station, but also air quality in the Fore River area. Now comes the addition of the Enbridge gas compressor, which adds to the security risks of Braintree and surrounding communities, and has long been a concern by an organization known as FRAX, or Fore River Residents Against the Compressor Station. Many of the members of FRAX are Braintree residents. At our last town council meeting, the executive branch advised they are going to create a notification system if an emergency occurs at the new compressor station. Yet an incident occurred September 30th of 2020, and according to one of my constituents, and obviously I'm speaking on behalf of Councilor O'Brien, notification was absent. These issues add to the health, security, and safety of the residents of Braintree, and the council needs to hold one or more hearings with the executive branch to discover actions being taken. This request is to refer the above items to the Public Safety Committee, with invitations being sent to Mr. Lang, FRAX, MAPC, to provide a contact as an expert witness, and the executive branch to provide documentation describing actions being taken. In addition, the Public Safety Committee should discuss whether an evacuation procedure be created should an incident worse than the some recent incidents, occur either at the Enbridge compressor station or at the Citgo tank farm. And that is from Town Councilor Stephen O'Brien, representing District 4 for the Braintree Town Council. So I want to thank our other attendees here tonight. Lieutenant Robert Pistorino from the Braintree Fire Department, Sergeant Brian Eng from the Braintree Police Department, as well as Robert Millette, the I guess newly promoted director of the Braintree Emergency Management Agency. So Robert, congratulations on your recent promotion. With that said, I guess I'll just open this up for an initial sort of discussion. Councillor Mackin or Councillor Ryan, did you have any specific questions for any of the individuals that we assembled tonight in regards to this? Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Chairman. No, I just want to say thank you to Mr. Pistorino and Mr. Eng and Mr. Millette for attending the meeting tonight. And I think this is pretty good that we've had a meeting on the Public Safety Committee. We haven't had one in a while, and I think we should keep moving forward and meeting on a more regular basis. And I appreciate these folks coming and attending, and I'd love for them to be a part of us, this committee moving forward, whatever meetings we come up with. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. Councillor Mackin, any direct questions for any of the members assembled before I get going?
Not at the moment. Mr. Millette's always very responsive to me. I know I can reach out to him whenever I do have a question. So no, anything I may have had is just hear what they have to say first and ask questions from there.
All right. So I guess I'll start off with, and I guess whomever the subject matter expert on the individual question might be can raise your hand. You don't have to use the raise hand function. Waving your hand works just fine for this. So I guess what are the we have a couple of facilities. I mean, we're specifically tonight through Councilor O'Brien's sort of I guess motion, for lack of a better word, or resolution, addressing sort of that Fall River Basin area with Enbridge and the gas compressor station. But obviously we have, the Citgo, we have the gas tanks, and we also have clean, the Clean Harbor type facility. So what is, or who is developing the evacuation procedures for those areas, and how are they managed? And I don't know who might be the first person to speak on that.
Chairman Reyes, I can speak a little bit on that.
Thank you.
We attended, Rob and I actually attended a meeting recently where we spoke with representatives from Enbridge who went over basically the plan they have in place for if they need an evacuation in Weymouth. Their contact over there was Lieutenant Chef Wall, Rob, one of the Robs. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but
okay. So
one of their fire lieutenants over there. For right now, what they have is a reverse 911 call to residents in the immediate area. And then if necessary, for a wider evacuation, they're going to have Weymouth PD going up and down neighborhoods on just the loudspeaker, telling people to where to evacuate to and what the potential dangers are. In terms of the overall impact as far as if there's any kind of emergency there, I know that their response now is to hold at the entrance unless there's a life-saving need, and then only enter once they have representatives from Enbridge who have emergency responders on standby, specifically trained to those situations. As of right now, they're saying that if there is anything catastrophic, they're looking at 500 to 1,000 feet, and then as far as any kind of damage area, and then they're going to move everybody. They're looking at a half-mile radius, which, as far as I can tell, I don't believe extends into Braintree. The biggest concern they had as far as overall damage was obviously that even before the compressor station was there was a Citgo terminal and a few other locations that they considered potentially dangerous that they had to keep an eye on. And so they're just adding one more aspect to their emergency response. As far as I know, Weymouth PD is beginning to formulate their emergency response. We were told we were going to be getting a copy of that soon. Everybody was at that meeting. And then we were going to make recommendations up to our department heads as to any kind of response we were going to have going forward.
Okay. Thank you, Sergeant Eng. Mr. Millette, did you have any, or Director Millette, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, back at one of the main council meetings, I believe it was the meeting that Councilor O'Brien made this suggestion to begin with. Shortly after that, I did put together a proposal for a preliminary evacuation plan for in the area of Braintree. Like Sergeant Ing just said, you know, that they are looking at a half a mile from the compressor station itself, which based on what I have seen does fall just short of entering Braintree. But their catastrophic ones, they have an extended ring out to a mile, which does include part of our residential area there. It does include parts of the Citgo tanks, parts of the power plant that we are there for. So the proposal that I did submit upstairs, I don't know what has come of it since then, had a 2-tier staged evacuation of the residential buildings close to the coast. It had everything to the north and east of 53, and then going back one more subsection to the north and east of Shaw, and then took into consideration that if something happened at the tank farm or the power plant that would more directly impact Braintree, have another fallback layer of evacuations to Commercial Street along that area. But everything would hinge for what Braintree does based on the conditions in Weymouth itself. So we may find ourselves with an emergency that occurs there, and due to the prevailing wind direction, due to what's going on and the size of what they have, that we may not have to do anything at all for Braintree residents.
So just out of curiosity, what would designate a catastrophic disaster that would extend to a mile versus the half mile that was sort of initially talked about? What would be catastrophic versus what could happen that would only extend a half a mile?
Lieutenant Sergeant, I don't know if either of you have something. I don't recall them giving out an example of what they would consider the difference between the two.
I'm assuming that catastrophic would be the whole thing going boom. That seems pretty catastrophic. So we'll go with that being catastrophic. But what is an event that would only have a half mile radius? I'm just trying to differentiate between the two. Like,
well, from the fire department perspective, if you had like a release that they had down there, like people didn't even know about, the stacks are up high and it's released and it's gone. But if you had some kind of explosion with some kind of cascading effect that affected, you had an explosion at Enbridge, and then you had a situation where it extended to the power plant. And then there's a lot more hazards at the power plant. And then if cascade, and then you have the tank farm, it would be more of a situation like that than any one thing.
Mm-hmm.
As far as a catastrophic, I mean, there's gas, obviously gas explosive, so you have an explosion. But then after that, what do you have?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you had a cascading thing with exposures, then that's, I mean, you can leave it up to your imagination what could happen.
Okay. And I guess for either yourself or for Sergeant Eng or Director Millette, obviously if there's an initial issue that affects Weymouth, I'm assuming there's some sort of mutual aid agreement that Braintree Fire or Braintree Police would be responding. What if there was a cascading effect that then affected Braintree? Are we going to be, I guess, short-staffed if we are already in Weymouth providing relief and then something additional occurs in that sort of cascading wave effect?
Well, hopefully with the, obviously events can overtake any kind of plan, right? So with the mutual aid that we have, you keep backfilling. Hopefully you would have enough, but I mean, initially you would run out of manpower very quickly. But over time, you would get up to whatever you needed. But in the initial stages, yeah, the manpower could possibly be
depleted,
overwhelmed. If you consider the situation that took place up in Lawrence and Andover, they were overwhelmed very quickly manpower-wise, and they simply kept calling out in a greater and greater radius for more fire, more police, and just kept bringing people in, you know, like Lieutenant Pistorino was suggesting. I believe they wound up calling out as far as northern New Hampshire and western Massachusetts. I know they eventually called down to us for the lighting towers, and I believe we sent an engine as well, but I'm not 100%.
I was there the next morning, yeah.
Yep.
We were there first thing, I think it was Saturday morning. It was Friday morning. And they did a great job as far as I was concerned, as far as the staging area. And Enbridge mentioned like their national plan and what they have set up. They have plenty of resources to get there. It just takes time. But yeah, the question I think was about initially getting manpower that we could get overwhelmed very quickly in a mutual aid situation.
Back to Director Millet. I believe you indicated you have submitted some sort of proposal. Do you have any sort of timeline on when you're going to hear back on that proposal that you submitted?
I don't know.
Okay, when did you submit it?
It was the day after whatever meeting that whichever meeting with Councilor O'Brien first talked about. I believe Councilor Mackin was discussing it too. I want to say it was 2 or 3 meetings ago.
Okay, so we're talking still with like within a month.
Yeah.
Okay, and that was submitted to the mayor's office.
Yes.
Okay. Based on sort of those discussions, anything, I don't want to continue just to hog the spotlight here. Any further questions or statements from Councilor Mackin or Councilor Ryan?
Yeah, I do have a couple. And
Councilor
following
Mackin?
up on what Chairman Ringus just said regarding the timeline. As far as, the plan you submitted, I know this isn't a common thing that you've really dealt with before, but what would the process be? The mayor office signs off on it, it's all set. Would it need approval from Chief Dubois and Chief O'Brien, or did you already kind of get some input from their departments when you made it? Do just kind of what going forward, like, do we know what the next steps would be for this? Or are you just essentially waiting on the mayor's office?
Essentially, as my understanding goes, it would actually end up with the LEPC because any plan like this would have to become part of the town's comprehensive emergency management plan. So, I simply put it in so that, like I said, it was a preliminary idea so that we had the basis for what we should and would be looking at in the event we have anything. I'm not entirely sure how it gets from there to the LEPC, but I'm assuming it would run that route, and that when the next LEPC meeting is actually scheduled, the discussion would be on the agenda.
Thank you. And I know we're not at the point for this yet because we don't actually have the plan yet. But when we do, have you given any thoughts? I'm sure you have, what the distribution or publication of it would be. Just go on the town website, or everybody in the affected area would get a paper copy delivered to them. Do you know what that would be yet?
I don't know what they would get. That would have to go through legal from our perspective first, and most likely legal from Enbridge's. I know the plan that Weymouth released just last week, which I now have a copy of down in the office. It is available online. I don't remember the website off the top of my head, but if you go to their main website for the town, it is there.
I think I have that if I can get it for you.
Oh, there we go. They still have annexes that are in for review that Enbridge hasn't approved yet. The Department of Homeland Security does consider this facility to be a high terrorist threat. They obviously have a lot of legal and national security implications that we can't just release to the public, which is the same for any kind of comprehensive emergency management plan. There's a lot in the plan that we don't. I know there's a public copy of ours at Thayer, but we just can't release the whole thing to it. The various hazardous materials things that could be in there. So it would have to run through all of that. But yes, with the Pilgrim plan that we were part of for many decades, I know down in Plymouth, they had like little calendars they would give out that would have the evacuation routes, it would have the evacuation zones, it would have all of those things contained within them. So there's any number of ways you could go about trying to get this information out there.
All right, thank you. That's it. No more questions.
Okay. I guess the question I would have is, when this is approved, I think I'd like to see it back before, or this is more of a statement rather than a question, see this back before this committee, and then possibly for some sort of referral to the full council at that point, because I do think this is something that has the magnitude to infect the entirety of the town. And obviously, you don't even want to imagine something of that nature occurring. But obviously, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And I think we need to ensure that we are addressing the issues that we've seen, various residents from East Braintree bring to us. I mean, there's sort of environmental factors, there's health factors, and then there's something of this nature. So I think it is something we should revisit in the months to come. Like Councilor Ryan said, I would like to see this subcommittee meet a little more. I think there is definite reasons for us to meet on a variety of issues. I think Ms. Director Millette noted that some of these facilities are considered high terrorist threat areas by the Department of Homeland Security. I know Braintree, despite its size, has a number of them sort of condensed in the Northeast. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the Plaza has been designated one. I know that Clean Harbors used to be. And then, so we have a variety of sort of possible targets that for whether it be accidental or deliberate. So I think it is important that we continue to sort of address this. Lieutenant Pistorino, I saw you vanish and then reappear. I think you were looking for something.
Yeah, there's a couple of websites that they gave out as far as response and evacuation stuff. He said the gentleman from Enbridge said he had given something to the department heads, but Chief O'Brien said he didn't receive it. He didn't have it. But emergencyresponderinfo.com was one of the websites that they gave out, and enbridge.com/safe community. So if there would be, if residents were interested, somebody had asked how they would find out information on what was going on. Those were two places they said you could look.
Okay. Thank you. I think my last question would be to, I believe probably Director Millette and Sergeant Eng, because you said you both attended that recent meeting. It was in Weymouth. There was actually Enbridge representatives that were available for comment at that meeting.
Yeah, they had a couple of their emergency responder guys and their safety management guys there for actually giving the presentation.
Okay. And was that I mean, what, in terms of the meeting itself, was that a council meeting? What kind of meeting was it that you were attending? Or was it specific to first responders?
It was mostly first responders.
Okay. All right. I think perhaps this committee should look at having some, Clerk Semino, if we can note some sort of contact with Enbridge to see if, whether it be the full council or this committee itself, to have some sort of talk with those folks so we can have an update for our residents, and obviously in conjunction with police, fire, and BEMA. Anything further from Councilor Ryan or Councilor Mackin? Nothing from Councilor Ryan, nothing from Councilor Mackin. So tonight, thank you to Lieutenant Pistorino, thank you Sergeant Eng, and thank you Director Millette for your time tonight. I think this is something that we should revisit in the very near future. I don't think there's anything necessary for us to vote or move forward tonight, but I think like the school plan, we'll get back in touch. Clerk Semino, at some point, if perhaps we can follow up with the mayor's office in terms of what is going on with the plan that was submitted by Director Millette, and perhaps at our next meeting, Chief of Staff Taub might be available to sort of discuss that if there's been any sort of movement on approving it.
Yeah.
All right. With that said, thank you for everyone's attendance tonight. That does sort of take us to the end of our agenda. So with that said, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Councilor Ringus, if I may.
Withdrawn.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Councilor.
Larry.
No, that's fine, Charlie. Director Millette, probably Pistorino, if you guys want to leave, this might not quite apply, but I reached out to Chairman Ringus earlier today. There was an accident in my district on Saturday, which is believed to be fatal at the intersection of Route 37 and South Street, and several of my constituents reached out to me regarding the safety there. And as we were having our first meeting of this committee tonight, I just thought it was appropriate to touch on. That intersection is, scary. There's frequently accidents there. You can always hear brakes screeching. Up until 2 weeks ago, kids were actually walking to school, crossing that intersection, and we were able to get them a school bus. And thank you to Dr. Hackett and the mayor. But they're both state roads, so it's a little out of our control, but I do think we need to start. I'd like to start moving forward to addressing the concerns there, whether it be a light or some other sort of mitigation measure. And I think, I'd like to contact the police department and get accident statistics there. We could ask our traffic engineer to take a look at it. And again, as it's state-owned, we can reach out to Representative Cusack for help, and also perhaps a formal letter to the Mass DOT for their assistance, as well as because it's not the first fatality that's taken place at that intersection. There's been many, and including in the area going up the road. It's a very dangerous area, and I think we do have to take a look at it. So anyway, I know it happened recently, so this wasn't on the agenda. Thank you for letting me bring it up, and I echo Charlie's sentiment that we should have this committee meet more often, as there are ongoing issues. Thanks, that's it.
Thank you, Councilor Mackin, and thank you for kind of giving me the heads up. If you desire, I think maybe coming up with some sort of an exact sort of representation of what you're looking for. We can then have it sort of referred to public safety and get hopefully the appropriate folks here to speak with, whether that be folks from DPW or whether it be from the state, and obviously Representative Cusack could probably aid us in some of that in conjunction with the police department. I think we've said it a couple times tonight, and I think it is worth us meeting much more regularly. I'd like it to, at the very least, be on a bi-monthly basis. I think this committee has the ability to do a lot. Obviously, the COVID situation could be looked at as not only a public health emergency, but also a public safety issue. We have various things going on in town in various areas that are of high concern. And I think for us to keep in contact and being able to provide residents and the full council with updates as to fire, police, or other public safety issues that might be ongoing is important. So I think I will look to schedule these meetings much more often and keep the agendas similar to this, where we can address various issues in a shorter time frame, and then get back to the full council when need be. So thank you to, again, Sergeant Eng, who stuck around. Thank you to the councilors, and obviously thank you to Clerk Semino for her work in bringing this together. And at this point, I think Councilor Ryan could make his motion again if he wanted.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Ryan, a second by Councilor Mackin. Clerk Semino, can I have a roll call vote?
Councilor Ringus,
Aye.
Councilor Mackin,
Aye.
Councilor Ryan,
Aye.
all in favor to adjourn.
That is unanimous, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Have a good night, everybody.